What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to InvestQ. And today we're going to be talking about something that me and you are both aware of. It's the fact that, as we know, we are getting closer to BigBear.ai's second quarter earnings report. And naturally, investors are asking the same questions they've been asking for weeks. Can the company beat revenue expectations? Can they continue improving margins? Will management reaffirm full-year guidance? They're also asking, will they announce any new government contracts? And of course, in my opinion, what the big question would be, can BigBear.ai finally move closer to profitability? Now, don't get me wrong, those are all extremely important questions. But after spending the last few days, in fact, not even the last few days, the last few weeks, digging through BigBear.ai's investor presentations, product information, and some of their newer platform updates, I actually think there is a much bigger conversation that needs to happen for the company. Because profitability doesn't just magically appear, revenue doesn't magically grow on its own, and companies, they don't just wake up the next day with better margins just like that for no given reason. There's something that's going on behind the scenes, and those financial results, whether if it's improvements in gross margin, which we did get in Q1, whether if it's improvements in revenue or a path to profitability, those financial results are created because customers are actually buying products that solve real world problems. So today, instead of simply saying, I hope they beat earnings, I want to spend some time breaking down what BigBear.ai actually sells and how it is that those products fit into the AI and defense ecosystem, and why I personally think investors should be paying close attention to management's commentary surrounding these products during the upcoming earning call. Because, in my opinion, understanding the business is what helps you understand the financials. Now, before we jump in, I do want to make one thing extremely clear. Everything I'm discussing today comes from publicly available information, including BigBear.ai's investor presentations, public product information, SEC filings, and company announcements. So whenever I discuss how these products could impact the business or future financial performance, that's simply my own analysis and opinion as an investor. So with that said, let's jump into the video. So with that being said, first off, I do want to point out, to make it clear that BigBear.ai's their upcoming quarterly earnings report is set and scheduled to come out on July 30th. And according to analysts and the expectations out there, right now, BigBear.ai is expected to have their revenue expectations are supposed to land between 35 and 41 million, and GAAP earnings per share at a loss of 5 cents to 7 cents. So right now, if BigBear.ai comes in above the expectations that you're seeing on screen right now, investors would obviously react positively. And of course, if they miss, the market will react negatively. We wouldn't be surprised either way. But something I always try to remind myself during earnings seasons is that sometimes the headline numbers aren't actually what moves the stock. Sometimes it's management's outlook, and it could be other factors as well. Like, for example, it could be new contracts. It could also be something regarding their products or comments about customer demand. Even another example would be management talking about a product to beginning to be able to scale commercially. And those things can completely change how investors view the business going forward. And that's exactly the point of this video and why I'm making the video, because I do think that understanding the business itself helps us better understand what management is talking about when they discuss future growth. Now, I want to point out that BigBear.ai has a misconception around it among retail investors. And that misconception is that BigBear.ai is simply just an artificial intelligence company. But that's just oversimplifying the company as a whole, because BigBear.ai isn't just selling one chatbot. They are building multiple AI platforms that solve different problems across defense, intelligence, logistics, homeland security, transportation, and increasingly commercial markets. Some products help organizations analyze enormous amounts of information, and some automate repetitive work, and some modernize decades-old software, alongside the fact that they also help organizations securely deploy artificial intelligence, and others help airports identify passengers and detect potential threats faster. And when you take a step back, you start realizing that this is not just one single product. It's really an ecosystem of AI solutions. And that's where I personally think investors sometimes underestimate what BigBear.ai is trying to build. And instead of just asking if AI is able to make money, if the AI can make money, I think the better question that you should be asking is, which of these products are customers actually adopting? Because at the end of the day, what ultimately will this is what ultimately will drive revenue, what will help improve margins, and it's over time what can move a business towards profitability, which are the things that investors are looking for whenever a quarterly earnings report comes out. Now, what I want to point out is the first product that I'm going to talk about in this video would be regarding generative AI platform. So their generative AI platform, and when most people hear the words generative AI, there's lots of people that don't even know what to think when they hear about it. They just hear AI and think it's cool. But most people that have any understanding, they mostly think about ChatGPT for the most part. I would say that's a fair assessment. And I do think that is understandable, but BigBear.ai isn't just trying to become a knockoff version or just a different version of ChatGPT. That's not what they're trying to do. Instead, what they're doing is building something much broader. Think of it almost like a secure enterprise AI platform. And according to the company's public information, this platform is designed to connect with well over 100 different large language models from multiple providers. And that includes models from companies, none other, and companies like OpenAI, you got Anthropic, Google, Meta, and many others. Now, if you're asking why that's important, the reason that would be important is because AI changes incredibly fast. The best model today may not be the best model next year. And government agencies don't want to redesign their workflow every single time a new AI model comes out. Instead, what they want is flexibility, and they want one secure platform where they can choose whichever model best fits the mission they're trying to accomplish. And that is exactly what BigBear.ai is trying to provide. And overall, real quick, talking about flexibility, why flexibility matters in the first place, I want to give you an analogy. First off, think about your smartphone. You don't buy your phone just because of one app, one application. You buy it because it gives you access to thousands of different apps on your phone. And I do think that BigBear.ai is trying to accomplish something very similar here. And instead of locking customers into one AI provider, they are creating a platform where organizations can leverage many different AI models inside one secure environment. And that flexibility could become increasingly valuable as AI technology continues evolving, especially for government customers that often deploy software for years before making major infrastructure changes. Now, another thing that stood out to me was just how heavily BigBear.ai emphasizes security, because the reality of it is government agencies aren't going to upload classified information to public AI chatbots. They simply can't, for obvious reasons, just using common sense, because national security information, military intelligence, or other sensitive government data requires an entirely different level of protection. And according to the company's public materials, their platform was specifically designed with the secure enterprise environments in mind. And that includes things like zero trust architecture, role-based access controls, private deployments, and compliance standards required by many government customers. And they are also continuing to pursue higher government security authorizations. Now, to be clear, another question that you might be asking is why that matters. I'm glad you asked that. And the reason that matters is because without those security standards, many government agencies wouldn't even be allowed to use artificial intelligence like this in the first place. So when I look at this platform, I do not just see another AI chatbot. I see a product that was built specifically for organizations that have much stricter security requirements than your average business. And in my opinion, that is an extremely important distinction. So the next thing that I want to talk about, product number 2, would be the AI agent builder. Now, here is something that really caught my attention while researching this company, because BigBear.ai is also developing something called AI agent builder. Now, if you've ever heard of the term AI agent before, don't worry. Let me simplify it for you. Imagine hiring a digital employee, and it's an employee that's digital and never sleeps and never gets tired and can repeatedly perform the same task over and over and over and over again. Maybe that AI agent reviews thousands of documents, and maybe it summarizes intelligence reports, and it also could potentially organize logistics information. And don't forget the fact that it has the potential to potentially monitor incoming operational data 24 hours a day. Now, it also could help answer internal employee questions automatically. And instead of asking some highly trained employee to spend hours doing repetitive administrative work, these AI agents can automate many of those tasks. And according to BBAI, BigBear.ai, organizations can build many of these AI agents with little to no coding experience. And now I want you to think about that for a second, because traditionally, if you wanted to automate a workflow, you'd probably need software developers. And not just software developers, you'd also need engineers, you'd need weeks of development, and plenty of testing. But tools like this have the potential to lower the barrier significantly, and that could make adoption easier for organizations that don't have massive software development teams. Now, obviously, that doesn't automatically mean millions of dollars of new revenue will be coming tomorrow. But if management begins talking about increasing deployments, new enterprise customers, or expanding software subscriptions, those are exactly the kind of comments I'll personally be paying attention to during the earnings call, because ultimately, software, it only becomes valuable if customers actually use. Now, here's another product I want to talk about with you, is the legacy code refactoring. And I don't think it gets enough attention, because BigBear.ai's work modernizing legal software is something that needs more attention, because I do know that this probably isn't that exciting to talk about, but just give me a second and hear me out. Many government agencies, especially the ones within defense, still rely on software that was written decades ago. And some of these systems were built using programming languages that very few engineers specialize in today. And replacing those systems manually can take years, it can be very expensive, and is very time consuming. And don't forget the fact that in many cases, it introduces additional risks, because you're replacing systems that organizations depend on every single day. Now, according to BigBear.ai, they're using artificial intelligence to help modernize that process. And instead of writing every line of code by hand, AI, it can assist engineers by translating older software into modern programming languages while helping preserve the original functionality. Excuse me, guys. Now, to be clear, that does not mean that AI completely replaces software engineers. That's not the case. Not the case at all. That's not what I'm getting at. But it most definitely can significantly reduce the amount of mutual work required. And that can save organizations an enormous amount of time and money. And that's important because governments around the world continue investing billions of dollars into modernizing aging technology infrastructure. And if BigBear.ai continues winning projects in that area, it represents another potential source of revenue beyond traditional AI chat applications. And honestly, that's one of the biggest takeaways I had after researching all of this. And BigBear.ai isn't simply trying to sell AI conversations. They're trying to solve operational problems, and whether that's helping analysts process information faster, automating repetitive work, or modernizing decades-old software, the goal is simply to provide solutions that save organizations time, money, and resources. And when customers believe those solutions provide real value, that's ultimately what creates long-term revenue opportunities. Now, so far we've talked about several of BigBear AI's internally developed AI capabilities, but in my opinion, one of the biggest moves the company have made over the past year, and this article came out on March 21st, 2024, so actually 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, it wasn't building a new product, it was acquiring one. And that's where Pangiam, that's where they come into the story. Now, let's talk about what I personally believe has one of the biggest turning points for BigBear AI over the last year. Again, the acquisition of Pangiam. Now, when companies announce acquisitions, a lot of investors immediately ask one question. And that question is, how much revenue is this going to add for the company? And that is definitely an important question, but I think another question that investors should also be asking is, what new markets does this acquisition open up? Because that's where I personally think Pangiam becomes really interesting. Because prior to the acquisition, BigBear AI already had a pretty decent presence in artificial intelligence. They also had a presence in defense, logistics, and government analytics. But now Pangiam expanded that into entirely new markets, including airport security, border protection, identity verification, and biometric screening. So instead of only serving defense customers, BigBear AI has now has products that can also be deployed in commercial transportation and homeland security environments, and that significantly expands their addressable market. Now, speaking about the airport security, one example that you probably remember was the recent announcement involving airport security, about how BigBear AI announced that one of its AI-powered screening solutions received approval after testing in the Netherlands. Now, and that's not this press release on screen. Let me just show that to you real quick. So, BBAI recent approval. I'll just show it to you real quick. This right here, this one. Oh, let me go to the press releases tab. This one right here. I'm talking about the one that came out on July 9th. That's the one, to be extra specific, that's what I'm talking about. Now, quick reminder before we continue. If you're enjoying the content and want to connect with the community, check out the first link below for the free InvestQ community. And if you want access to advanced stock research and tools, the second link is a Prophecy 7-day trial for just $7. And last, if you want daily market updates and behind the scenes content, follow me on Instagram using the third link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, to be clear, obviously, one approval doesn't suddenly transform the financials overnight. But here's why I think investors should be paying attention, because every successful deployment creates another reference customer. And in enterprise software, reference customers matter, because if one airport successfully deploys your technology, other airports may become much more willing to evaluate the same solution again. Now, I'm not saying that's guaranteed, but that's generally how enterprise technology adoption works. And companies often want to see successful deployments before making purchasing decisions themselves. So during the earnings call, I'll definitely be listening to any updates. I'll be listening for any updates regarding additional airport deployments. I'll also be looking for international expansion or broader adoption of Pangiam's technology. Now, another thing Pangiam brought to BigBear AI would be regarding their expertise in biometric identity verification, because while that may sound complicated, it's actually something most of us have already experienced, because I want you to think about using Face ID on your phone. Everybody is familiar with that. But instead of typing in a password, your face becomes your identity. Now imagine applying that same concept to airports. And not just airports, but also with border crossings, government facilities, or secure military locations. And instead of relying on physical documents, organizations can use facial recognition and biometric verification to improve both security and efficiency. Again, these aren't consumer products. These are enterprise-grade security platforms designed for larger organizations. And if adoption continues growing, that represents another potential source of long-term software revenue. Now, next, what I got for you would be regarding CargoSeer. And this is another platform that caught my attention. And this one focuses more on supply chain intelligence. Now, we've all seen over the last several years how disruptive supply chain problems can become, whether if it's shipping delays, port congestion, or inventory shortages. Small disruptions can create enormous financial consequences, and CargoSeer is designed to give organizations better visibility into what's happening throughout their supply chains. And instead of simply reacting after the problem occurs, AI analyzes available information, identifies potential disruptions, and helps organizations make better operational decisions. Now again, that's another example of BigBear.ai using artificial intelligence to solve real business problems instead of simply generating text like a chatbot. Now, here's something I honestly didn't appreciate until I started digging into deeper, and that is regarding BigBear.ai's Edge AI. Now, most people do think that AI requires constant internet access, but that's not always realistic, and that's not always the case, because think about military operations or ships operating at sea, remote military bases, forward operating locations, disaster response teams, or even emergency operation centers. These are plenty of situations where internet connectivity can be limited, or sometimes it might even just be unavailable all in all. And that's where BigBear.ai's Edge AI strategy becomes incredibly interesting, because instead of relying entirely on cloud computing, they are building AI systems capable of operating locally. Now, that means AI can continue functioning even in disconnected environments. So for defense customers, that's a huge capability, because in many military scenarios, you simply can't assume reliable internet access. Now, one product that also caught my attention was BigBear.ai's approach to simplifying AI deployment. And instead of customers having to build complicated AI infrastructure, complicated AI infrastructure from scratch, BigBear.ai can provide an integrated solution containing the software. They can provide an integrated solution for the computing hardware, the security architecture, and the AI models. So I want you to think of it almost like buying a fully assembled computer instead of purchasing every component separately. And for government customers, that simplifies deployment significantly. And instead of coordinating multiple vendors, they can work through one integrated solution again. Now, that's another potential competitive advantage. Now, you might be wondering, maybe some people are just overall confused, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people just wondering, even though that these products sound impressive, what does this actually have to do with earnings? And that's a fair question, because that's pretty much what everybody cares about. It's just the earnings report coming up. Here's why I personally believe it matters. Every one of these platforms represents another opportunity for BigBear.ai to generate revenue. Not every product will immediately impact this quarter, and not every contract becomes revenue overnight. And also, not every customer signs a multi-million-dollar deal immediately. But when management discusses new deployments, customer expansion, software adoption, or increasing demand, those are all indicators investors can use to evaluate whether the business is moving in the right direction. Because, to be frank, over time, successful product adoption can translate into larger contracts. It can also translate into more recurring software revenue, better margins, and ultimately stronger financial performance. That's why I personally spend just as much time listening to management's commentary as I do looking at the actual earnings numbers themselves. Now, we've covered the generative AI platform, the AI agent builder, the legacy software modernization, Pangiam, of course, the airport security, CargoSeer, and Edge AI. But we're still not done yet, because in my opinion, There are two more platforms that really help tie the entire business together. And those are Conductor OS and Observe. And these products help explain why BigBear.ai talks so much about decision intelligence, and also why management believes artificial intelligence can become much more than just another chatbot. So, Conductor OS, when I first started reading about the platform, I'm going to be honest with you, it sounded very technical, incredibly technical. But once I really dug into it, I realized that the concept is actually pretty simple. So, imagine that you're running into a military operation. You've got drones flying overhead, radar systems collecting information, satellites that are transmitting imagery, and ground sensors picking up movement, and AI models analyzing all of that data. The problem isn't necessarily collecting the information. The problem is that all of those systems often operate independently, and they're speaking different languages, and one system doesn't automatically communicate with another. And this right here is where Conductor OS comes in. Think of it like an air traffic controller. Instead of every system operating on its own, Conductor OS helps orchestrate everything together. It also allows different AI models, different hardware, and different software systems to communicate inside one environment. And that is extremely important because military operations don't happen one system at a time. Everything has to work together. And according to BigBear.ai, Conductor OS also allows organizations to help update AI models while systems remain deployed in the field. And that's a pretty powerful capability because technology evolves quickly. And if you're able to improve AI performance without completely rebuilding your infrastructure, that becomes a major operational advantage. Now, lastly, let's talk about Observe, which I also did mention. And one of the products that I think is easiest for investors to understand is Observe. Imagine you're responsible for monitoring an entire military operation. You've got satellite imagery coming in, you've got live drone feeds, you've got GPS locations, maintenance reports, weather information, intelligence reports, supply chain updates, and sensor data. That's an overwhelming amount of information to process. No human being can realistically process all of that in real time. That's exactly the problem that Observe is trying to solve. Instead of forcing analysts to look through thousands of different data points, Observe pulls everything together into centralized platform, and it fuses information from multiple sources. And it looks for patterns, identifies anomalies, and helps decision makers understand what's actually happening. But here's the part that I found interesting, because according to BBAI, Observe, it doesn't simply organize information. It also attempts to predict potential problems before they happen. Maybe a supply chain disruption, maybe there's an equipment failure, maybe there is unusual activity along a border, and maybe operational risks are developing over time. And instead of reacting after the problem occurs and after something has already gone wrong, the goal is to identify those risks early enough that organizations can respond before the situation gets worse. And honestly, that's one of the biggest advantages AI can provide. And it's not replacing human decision making, it's helping humans make better decisions faster. So why do any of these things that I mentioned matter for Q2 earnings? And again, a quick recap. I talked about generative AI platform, the AI agent builder, legacy code refactoring, Pangiam, airport security, cargo seer, edge AI, Conductor OS, and Observe. So the upcoming earnings report, one thing I really want investors to remember is that revenue doesn't appear out of nowhere. Revenue comes from customers buying products, and profitability comes from operating those products efficiently. And long-term shareholder value comes from building products customers continue using year after year. That's why I personally think that BigBear.ai's business is so important, because now when management starts talking during the earnings call, you actually understand what they're referring to. And if they mention expanded deployments, you know what that could mean. If they mention new AI platform customers, you now understand why that matters a little more. And if they discuss airport security, conductor OS, Observe, or the generative AI platform, those aren't just buzzwords anymore. They're actual products designed to solve specific customer problems. Now, what I'll personally be listening for I'll be looking at the revenue trends. I'll be looking at software adoption. I'll be looking for updates on Pangiam. I'll be looking for updates on gross margins, government demand, and checking to see the confidence that management has regarding forward guidance. Now, with all that being said, I've mentioned what it is I think about BigBear.ai, and I talked a lot about their products. And after spending several days researching all these different platforms, my biggest takeaway is I think many retail investors simply oversimplify BigBear.ai. People hear AI and immediately assume it's another chat GPT company, and they oversimplify what it is they do. But after doing lots of digging into the business, I actually think it's much more accurate to describe BigBear.ai as an enterprise AI software company focused on helping governments and large organizations make faster, better, and more informed decisions, whether that's airport security, defense, supply chains, legacy software modernization, decision intelligence, or generative AI. They're trying to solve real-world operational problems, and obviously that doesn't automatically mean that the stock is going up after earnings. That's not how investing works. The market could love the report, the market could hate the report, or the stock might barely move at all after the report. None of us knows because none of us has a genie to ask where the stock is going to go. Nobody has futuristic vision to be able to tell exactly what's going to happen, no matter what information you have in front of you, no matter what the data says. The stock market is very unpredictable. But I do believe understanding the business puts investors in a much better position to evaluate whatever management says next week. Because at the end of the day, I'm not investing in headlines. I'm investing in whether this company continues building products that customers actually want to buy. And personally, that's exactly what I'll be paying attention to during this earnings report. But I'd love to hear what you guys think because I talked a lot today. I got a very long video for you. I covered many different topics, so let me know what you think about BigBear.ai and let me know what it is you want to see in future upcoming videos. But besides that, guys, David over here at InvestQ out. Stay safe, keep making good decisions with your long-term portfolios, and I'll see you on the next video.